Hi everyone, welcome to the summer holidays at last. Woo-hoo! You've made it, yay! I hope you can enjoy some sunshine, some fun times over the summer. Hope we all can. So we've been looking, haven't we, at living Jesus-centred lives, adopting the same rhythms and priorities that Jesus had while he was on earth, and some of our city life rhythms has been grow, serve, invite, and today I'm going to look at worship. So here we go, worship. I want to tell you a story that relates to worship. It's about a brooch, a lost brooch. So imagine a woman, not young and not old, who inherited a brooch from a relative when she died. The brooch had been in the family for years, but no one knew where it had come from. It wasn't much to look at, and the metal around the stones was tarnished and brown. The stones were cloudy, layered in dust and grime after a long time of neglect. If it could have spoken, the brooch would have said, "Please remember me, and I will shine for you. I will make any outfit you wear more valuable and beautiful than you could ever know." But as we all know, brooches can't speak, and so the brooch was left under piles of forgotten items in the woman's loft, and the months passed by. Then one day the woman was in the loft looking for a tin of paint to cover a mark on her kitchen wall. And when the brooch just fell from the pile and landed on the floor right next to her, she picked it up and blew a layer or two of dust away, and then she slipped it in her pocket, and she carried on looking for the paint. A few hours later, having touched in her kitchen wall, she left the brooch in her pocket. Perhaps she'd pop it into the charity shop tomorrow. The next day, she headed into town, taking the brooch with her to drop into the charity shop. And next door to the charity shop was a jeweller's. Her curiosity was stirred, and she wondered what the jeweller would think of the brooch. With some awkwardness, why hadn't she tried to give it a bit of a polish first? She handed over the dirty, tarnished brooch, and with an embarrassed laugh, higher than she wanted, she asked if he might look at it and tell her something about it. The old jeweller, with his headband, with a light on it, and his magnifying glasses, a bit like these, reminded her of a cross between a miner and a pirate. Looking rather uninterested and bored, he placed the brooch on his workbench and he began to inspect it closely. He took his polishing cloth and he rubbed at the metal. Shiny gold metal began to poke through. Then he brushed away at the stones and he peered through his glass to inspect them more closely. He started slowly and quietly, and then he began to speed up. He started to rub away at the metal, bringing out more and more of its colour and its shine. He began to make little squeaking noises, gasps of surprise and delight. By the time the woman spoke to him, he was breathing heavily, smiling widely, and sweating a bit unpleasantly around his temples. "Is the brooch of some interest or value?" she asked the jeweller. "Is it of some interest or value?" the jeweller replied. "Yes, that's what I said," the woman said. "Yes! Yes!" replied the jeweller. "It is of immense value and worth. In fact, its worth is beyond measure. It's priceless. Never in all my long years have I seen such beauty and workmanship, such exquisite stones, such intricate settings. This is the work of the ancient Oriental craftsman, Tiffany Wong Hu. Look at his trademark stamp that's provided on the brooch, showing that he crafted it. At this, he pointed to the oriental symbols impressed into the now shiny gold metal. He made only a few brooches in his lifetime, all of them for royalty. How did you come by it? Do you have royal connections? Well, none that I realised, the woman said, feeling a little bit taller than when she entered the shop. It must be her invisible crown, she chuckled to herself. No one can produce work as wonderful as this, the jeweller continued. There is nothing to compare with its quality and its magnificence. You must treasure it and ensure you keep it polished and safe. The woman looked at the now polished and cleansed brooch lying in a purple velvet box the jeweller had found for it. It was as if she was looking at it for the first time, and she could suddenly appreciate its great worth to her. She noticed its warm gold, intricate settings, the quality and the tone of the precious jewels. She pinned it onto her coat. It transformed it. Knowing she had this brooch would change her life. She hugged the startled jeweller in thanks, and she walked out of the jewellery shop, past the charity shop towards home, feeling like a princess. This lady didn't realise what she had, the treasure that had been given to her. She had neglected to treasure it or wear it. It had become forgotten, neglected, dusty and dull. Do we realise what we have in Jesus? Have we appreciated the true worth of Jesus' love, of his grace, of his salvation and his blessings in our lives? Or has our worship become a bit forgotten and neglected, a bit dusty or dull? Do we realise that as we give him our gratitude and worship, we will know our true worth too? Worship is seeing Jesus' worth and treasuring it, living with him in a way that our whole life is impacted and transformed. For many people, they can see God the way the woman used to see the brooch, living completely unaffected by its presence, unaware of the true value of what she had. But God is changing us from being like that to being aware of his presence and his worth at all times, and treasuring the remarkable relationship that we have as we carry him and we involve him in our every aspect and decision of our lives. So maybe an activity you might like to do as a family or as an individual. What about getting some pens, some paper, some plasticine or Fimo, gathering some sticky gems? Why don't you draw or create a brooch that's a symbol of the treasure that Jesus is to you? Maybe you could put a stone in it to represent each of the following: his love for you, his grace, his forgiveness, his purpose, his gifts, or any others that you want to choose. And place it somewhere to remind you to thank him and worship God throughout your day. And then remember to walk like a prince or a princess. Now, I also just wanted to include, I've been asking some of the City Life family for some testimonies about how they find Jesus and God's work to be awesome beyond words and astonishing, which is how it describes God in the Psalms, in Psalm 47 verse 2. So let's hear and be encouraged by some stories from the City Life family.
The Lord Most High is awesome. Yes, he is. I look at creation, the hills, the mountains, the trees, the flowers, the clouds, the sky, the rainbow, and I marvel in his ability to create such beauty. I then look at my own life and I see how I have experienced his faithfulness and love in providing for me a loving husband and family, friends, a great church. He has given me all I have needed. in Australia, Eritrea, and here in England. I remember a certain instance when we were first married. Roger cut his finger, and we didn't have any plasters and we didn't have any first aid whatsoever. And I just cried out to the Lord, help us. And in that post, a few minutes later, there was some money that a friend owed us, and we had enough money to buy plasters. So off I went to the shops. Yes, I can say our God is awesome. He knows and he sees our every need. He keeps watch. He is indeed an awesome God. So clap your hands and rejoice in him and who he is.
Well, I experienced his astonishing awesomeness firsthand several years ago. I was a missionary in Mozambique, so I was at mission school, learning to tell people in the wilderness about God. And one day we were on outreach in a little village, and my friend and I, we were praying for this little girl. She came and stood beside me. She was probably about 5 or 6, and she couldn't look at me because her eyes were cross-eyed and they were all yellow. So my friend and I started to pray for her, and I saw her eyes go white, and she looked at me straight several times, and I could see that God was healing her, and it was awesome and astonishing. We carried on praying because we felt God telling us that she couldn't hear. So we prayed for her hearing and asked God to open her ears. During that time, she never said a word to us. She never spoke a word or responded. And eventually it was time for us to go, and she ran off home. Later that day, we were back at that village to do some more outreach, and she came running over to us. She was smiling and happy, and again she didn't say anything, so we carried on praying for her. And there was a lady with her who was very animated and excited, but we couldn't understand what she was saying because she spoke in Portuguese. We asked someone to interpret for us what she was saying, and she was this little girl's mum, and she said that morning when her daughter had left home, she could not hear and she'd never spoken before. And when she came home, she could hear and she was speaking. And she then called her, and the little girl responded and turned and called her back. And her mum wanted to know how on earth that was possible. And we were telling her about God, who loves her. And for me, that sums up that Psalm 47 verse 2. How great is our God's awesome and astonishing. It was awesome and it was astonishing.
For the Lord Most High is awesome. He is the great King of all the earth.
What does that mean to you?
I think it means if you think of animal food chain, like in priority, God would always come first. Like, God comes first in everything. Because if you think of King Charles wouldn't have been king without God, because God made King Charles to be a king.
That verse, the Lord God Most High is astonishing, awesome, beyond words. And the bit that leaps out for me is the bit about astonishing. And it's how God surprises me beyond all of my dreams and imagination, with his goodness, with his presence, with his solutions. And I think practically that's looked like for me in these days. He's astonished me. We've had some tricky situations in our family that I just didn't know really how there was any solutions or a way forward. And it feels like a lot of the decisions we make, a lot hangs on it. I live with a lot of people, I've got a lot of kids, so a lot of people are affected by the decisions, and it has just astonished me how I've seen God's help. I've seen him help to provide creative solutions and a way through, beginnings of way through, so that people can everyone can flourish, and that astonishes me.
So I think when I hear the word astonishing, I just think of nature, and for me, dog walking is still quite new, and going out when there's hardly any people in the fields and where there's clouds and the light breaking through and looking at the ecosystem just blows me away. And I think that's where I find my spirituality at the moment, is in the middle of nature, and in the middle of what is an astonishing creation, that it can self-sustain, and it's just utterly beautiful, the intelligence and the creation of God. So yeah, that's what I think of.
The Lord God Most High is astonishing, awesome, beyond words. Eve, what does that verse say to you?
It tells me that God and Jesus are both astonishing and the best.
Thank you, Eves. Days, we're now going to come on to you. What does this verse say to you?
God is creative.
Thank you, Days. And Jed, what were your thoughts about this verse?
Well, I thought that God can never be and then leave.
So with that psalm and that verse in Psalm 47, the thing that it makes me think of is the beauty of nature and the intricacy that we see in nature, in the details. Just makes me think of how incredible, how detailed God is, and that is beyond anything that we could describe or even fathom. God's creativity in nature. This always inspires me. I'm lucky enough to work outside, and I'm often sort of taken aback by the beauty of what God has created.
Wasn't it encouraging and inspiring to hear how God is astonishing and awesome to those that we know? Let's keep telling those stories. Let's keep sharing our own examples with one another. And just to say, have a great summer and really look forward to seeing you soon. We'll be gathering at St Albans at the end of August on the 4th Sunday. So hopefully see you there. Lots of love.